preservation of and increased access to the 92nd Street Y Humanities Audio Archives is generously funded by the National Endowment for the Humanities.
And I will leave the specific honor of introducing tonight's artist to Patterson Sims, our moderator, who has been a moderator for a few years now. My task is to introduce Patterson, a thankless one since many of the subscribers know him, but here goes. I'll do it briefly. Patterson Sims is the Associate Director for Art and Exhibitions and the Curator of Modern Art at the Seattle Art Museum, from which he flies every few weeks to us. Patterson has also been the Associate Director of the Permanent Collection at the Whitney Museum of American Art. His list of writings is enormous, including the catalogs for many major exhibitions all over the world. The exhibitions themselves since 1977 are legion, and he is a lecturer much in demand from New York to Japan, and it would seem just about everywhere in between. So here to introduce tonight's major artist in our Artist Vision series is Patterson Sims. Thank you.
Helen and I are going to come out together because I always figure you're better off arriving with someone like this than alone. We've had a wonderful time preparing for this evening, and it's really been a fantastic opportunity for me to learn so much more than I already knew about Helen's work. And we're going to sit down now and converse.
Do you think I can have that thing in front of me? The stand?
Oh, I think we sit.
No.
Would be better.
Okay. All right. You want to sit? All right.
For Helen to arrive here tonight, she could come on foot because she's very much a neighbor of the Y. She comes here regularly to swim. She cares about the Y enormously, but she has in many ways delayed the actual face-to-face contact that she has tonight with all of you, and she's really been very much looking forward to it. In a wonderful new book which has come out about Helen's work, written by John Elderfield and published by Abrams just a matter of weeks ago, John Elderfield said that Helen Frankenthaler creates a world made harmonious in its freedom from utility. I think what is extraordinary about the work of Frankenthaler is that it does lift us to another realm. Helen was born in New York City in 1928, and again, she is someone who really comes from this neighborhood. She went to Dalton, she then graduated from Bennington, and she really emerged very rapidly after her graduation in the late 40s from Bennington and arrived in the New York scene in 1950, arrived to a remarkable degree full-blown with a remarkable set of friends that included Clement Greenberg, very shortly thereafter David Smith, and the full panoply of remarkable artists who were emerging at that time in American art. Within a decade, she had a retrospective at the Jewish Museum. 9 years after that, an exhibition at the Whitney Museum of American Art in 1969. In 1978, a group of her small paintings traveled around the world under the auspices of the USIA. In 1980, her prints were surveyed in an exhibition organized by Thomas Krenz, who's now become the director of the Guggenheim. And in 1989, she'll be the subject of a retrospective which will open in really 2 months' time, I guess, at the Museum of Modern Art. So we have a kind of parade of remarkable achievements, and a parade really of slides to begin those achievements. Helen has, in a wonderful way, written a statement which compresses so many of her ideas about painting, and in a certain way encapsulates some of the best kinds of advice that one could possibly want, both as a viewer of works of art and, as I know so many of you are, painters, workers and toilers in the field of art. During the slides, if you have questions, Helen encourages you to ask those questions. Raise your voices. Let me quote Helen. She said, "Drop your shyness and speak." So we're going to move to the slides and to what Helen has to say. We're both enormously gratified to think, A, how many people are here, and B, how many artists. And so I want to sort of toast in a kind of in a liquidless way, all the artists, and most of all, to toast Helen.
Thank you very much. I'm delighted to be here. I can't believe I'm not swimming. Yeah. I'm very hesitant to read this, and I'll sort of read it quickly, because they are really what I call thoughts, since I had to write it down, thoughts culled from an occasional journal, which it really is. It's just thoughts I have periodically and write them down about pictures or what I'm doing or what's going on about me, good or bad. And it really isn't advice. It's just sort of the whirrings and stirrings of my own mind. The slides I'm showing tonight, is this okay, this mic? The slides I'm showing tonight are a selection from 4 decades. Looking at them, I see the recurrence of specific themes and considerations, hopefully a continuity throughout a body of work. Making the selection, I could follow certain threads throughout the decades that may have to do with my particular play of space, which for me comes in large part from cubism, and or drawing, the use of line, color, and surface texture. These elements, when perfectly combined, hopefully produce the light or magic that make pictures work. For me, there is the use of line per se as drawn line, as opposed to the use of line acting as line and shape, created by color alone. I believe beautiful painting relies in large part on drawing with color. In a way, drawing is the secret of color, because color that doesn't work in space is meaningless decoration. Color comes out of and along with drawn working space. Color is often a fantastic byproduct of drawing. Only then can color seem to work on its own and independent of drawing. We are faced with the physical fact of the flat surface of the picture plane, one with corners and edges. We must be truthful to the play of risks of fooling that surface in a way into moving spatial light, a beautiful working picture that gives flatness depth. Scale and the play of space and light are largely what it's all about. That's the point, throughout history, in all paintings, always. One is essentially true to one's own wrist or signature, a continuity with visible changes and developments along the way. Often there may be a lurch backwards or forwards or sideways, but one basic gestalt or frame of reference remains throughout. I think these developments or deviations appear sometimes without notice, a sort of unconsciously programmed surprise, a natural order, a push to proceed. But at other times, I might refer more purposefully to past gestures for hints or directions towards how to grow. Occasionally, when I haven't worked in my usual rhythm for a while, I reach into the past in order to catch up to my more recent self and proceed from there. These shifts produce, hopefully, fortunate turns that push one's development forward. For example, my cubist background, mountains and sea, are built into me, and I refer to them naturally as my original home. Then I will spend days sorting through reproductions of paintings, Matisse's or Manet's, Degas, Courbet, Pierrot, Rembrandt, Titian, not so much to emulate them, but to try to come close to figuring out the je ne sais quoi of what makes them work. Why do I like them? What are they trying to do? At times, one has to set oneself a challenge of the unknown, certain experiments, letting what happens happen, and leaving it to the rhythm of the painting self for surprise. However, one cannot employ shock in lieu of valid surprise and the demands of the picture itself. Change and shock alone are transient and empty. Once experienced, the gesture is over. The shock of recognition is something else. I sometimes give myself challenges and experiments or a few exercises, such as not relying on black or white, or on line, or on tint, or on unsized canvas, to say, I've counted on this much too long, so let's wipe it out almost forcibly for a while, because it might be getting too facile. It almost works too well. Recently, once or twice to my surprise, I couldn't allow myself to cover a portion of unsized canvas. It cried out to be left alone, and I was fortunate enough to see that rather than feel, these days I cover the canvas completely, so I'm going to tint it or cover it or crop it. No, it had to be left there as unsized duck because it worked. And I could be wrong, but it's there. Or the same might apply to the treatment of forms, of shapes, or the use of white, to use it or not to use it, to say, I've laid off this for so long that I'm getting afraid of it, and that's just why I'm going to push that white. And then if it doesn't work, you know it doesn't work. But it might also dredge up a lot of new material, new ideas you didn't know you needed. It might have to do with tint or the sheer quantity of paint, or just eliminating a lot of dotting of the eyes, that instead you can push a certain shorthand. Or that you see something that looks unattractive, wrong to you, and yet you feel, no, let it be. But one must be careful of that, because sometimes that letting it be can be a sort of lazy or falling in love with what looks beautiful that you don't want to part with, but you must. Never be afraid of destroying pictures that tell you they don't work, and never be afraid of plunging over and back into a picture that might look beautiful and complete, but is calling you to risk more, even if it gets destroyed. Maintain a dialogue with the canvas, almost a loving war, in which you must allow for, recognize, play with accident, surprise, magic. Never allow for facility or sheer empty gorgeousness. The colored shapes or forms that one first puts down eventually become the needs or excuses for putting down other later necessary colors and shapes, and exactly where they belong in a given space. There must be a constant dialogue between color and line within a perfect scale and light. This order, sometimes taking a long time to create, sometimes not, can be so alarming, so puzzling, that the creator must transcend the shock of it and at the same time recognize that, yes, the surface works and must stay where it is. When an artist is taken aback and surprised by what he or she has painted, hopefully the artist is ready to recognize and handle this surprise. It might seem wrong or ugly or clumsy or puzzling. Those are crazy moments. They are real and vital moments, and they determine the course of the work. Hang on. To see yourself in an unprogrammed, not deliberate way. Be in command, yet out of control. Go against the rules, yet within a frame of reference and tradition. To be free without limits, to have a dialogue with your work and let yourself go in relation to it. Different pictures demand different things, and while an artist imposes many things upon the canvas, the canvas makes demands in return. A friendly, warring dialogue that hopefully might end up in something that works beautifully to mutual freedom and truth and development and adds to life. One can trace this in a line throughout the true history of many centuries of painting and what painting, the real nature of painting, is about. To identify and, my word, osmosize the past and present around you and go naturally, creatively free, head, heart, and wrist. Paintings have their beautiful working order just as nature itself has. Paintings don't lie. They must stand as truth on their own, projections of the artist. I might stand up for this. Can I be more over there? Just because I can't see. You need to be an act. You want to use it? Yeah, I can use it. All right. What do you mean? Okay, you use that. Okay. I'll use this if I need. These are all new objects to me. I'll start sitting because I think I'll see them better this way. Okay. What I'll do is just read you the title, the date, and the size, not approximate, but in feet, skipping inches, because otherwise it gets too lengthy. But I'll give you feet and titles and dates and the materials. And I'll try to go fairly quickly. What I have asked is, since the light is dim, Patterson or I will be able to see some violently waving hand with a very relevant question. And if he thinks it's okay, I'll leave it to him to get into it, all right?
It's going to be hard to ask questions.
Yeah.
Because I haven't had enough carrots recently to be able to see who might be asking the questions.
I have, yes, all right. Okay. Okay. How do we start? 1949. If it's not in focus, please yell. 1949, untitled, pencil and gouache on paper, 11 inches by 14 inches. I was still a student when I made this. It doesn't seem in focus to me. It's way out of focus.
What's focus for you is not focus for them.
They say it isn't.
Great.
Yeah.
I just
Good.
remember speaking to this.
Okay. I was still a student when I made this, and I had a teacher, Wallace Harrison, who had us working on these small sheets of really typing paper size. And I think I worked on this particular drawing and maybe one or two others with a heavy lead pencil if you were good, you could work up to using that minimal amount of gouache on it, but no more, no color. Really drawing. He was a drawing nut. And I think I worked on this drawing probably 2 months, never pleasing him, and full of erasures and redoing it. And finally, he sort of cracked a smile, and I had to go back to school anyway. But his was a great lesson. That and the other cubist training I had from Paul Feely at college really were my basic training, and one that obviously I went for, since there were many other alternatives, but this made my sense. (1950), another drawing, female figure study, charcoal on paper, 24 by 19. Untitled, 1950, oil on linen, 16 inches by 22 inches. Provincetown Bay, 1950, oil on sized primed canvas, 16 inches by 20 inches. New Jersey landscape, 1952, oil on canvas, 9 by 12 inches. Ed Winston's Tropical Gardens, 1951-52, oil and pencil on paper, 3 feet 1 inches by 15 feet 11 inches.
How did you happen to make that?
I made this, I had rented David Hare's studio for a year when he went to Paris, and he did a lot of photography and did a lot of work with Man Ray, and was a sculptor. And I ran out of paper, and I saw reams, bolts of this sort of photographer's background beige wrapping paper. And I helped myself. And I worked on it, and I thought instead of cutting off what I needed, I would just leave the roll and roll it out as I needed it. And it got to be about 18 feet long. And I finally ripped it off. You can see the end of it. Then I didn't know, how to take care of it. So I cut it in half, and I had it mounted, a couple years later on Masonite. But it's held up. It's there's a lot of enamel in it, and a lot of tube paint pigment. Not too much pencil. I don't know where that got in here, but there isn't much pencil at all. And to me, it shows then I was looking very hard at both. Well, I had come from a lot of staring at the old masters and the modern masters, and especially Kandinsky and Gorky as recent masters. And then I looked hard and long at the 40s Pollocks, and by that time I had a chance to see the 1950 Pollocks. But I was also looking very hard at de Kooning, which I think you can sort of see through those kidney-type shapes at the bottom. And in a way, it's sort of a marriage of all of that. Circus landscape, 1951, oil on sized primed canvas, 3 feet 4 inches by 3 feet 8. Window shade number 1. No, sorry. Great Meadows. Oh, okay. Window shade number 1. 1952, oil on window shade. Again, short of materials. I started looking at the shades. This this time they were my shades. And so I did one vertical one, this, and one horizontal one. And I must say, shades hold up. I mean, in more ways than one. This is Great Meadows, 1951, watercolor on paper, 22 inches by 30 inches. Hold that on a minute. I made this, and I was in New Jersey, in Great Meadows, where I also did that little landscape, because I used to go out and with an easel do very serious landscape painting, trying to get the tree and the weather and everything exactly the way it looked. And came indoors one cold night and did this and thought, it's terrible. And I don't know what it is. So I crumpled it up, and it was soaking wet by then. And I threw it in the fire, and somebody very close to me plucked it out and said, no one should ever do that, and uncreased it, let it dry by the fire, which is why I have it. And a few months later, I made this, which I've always felt came from a lot of things, including that gouache. This is Mountains and Sea, and it's 1952. Oil on canvas. It's 7 feet 3 inches by 9 feet 9 inches. And it's not a very good slide of it. In fact, slides are dreadful generally. Slides are dreadful. But it's as good as it can be. It's out of focus. Who's ever focusing? Unless it's me. Out. Can the focuser hear this? I hope it's out of focus. You had it. Okay, much better. Shattered, 1953, oil on canvas, 4 feet by 4.6. Open wall, 1953, oil on canvas, 4 feet 6 inches by 10 feet 11 inches. Blue Territory, 1955, oil on canvas, 9 feet 5 inches by 4 feet 10. And this is much more heavily painted than the preceding and following pictures, which is part of what I was saying before I sat down, that I felt at this period I wanted to work back and more into pictures, even if the pictures might not be as successful or whatever, just to get something from almost over-worrying a surface and getting into it. Thanks. Eden, 1956, oil on canvas, 8 feet 7 by 9 feet 9. Any you want up longer, just say something, but I'm trying to sort of go through a whole thing. That looks a little out of focus too. Slightly. No. Better, I think. Unless the slide is just that poor. It's called Nude, 1958. All these are oil on canvas unless I specify otherwise. 8.6 by 3.10. Definitely out of focus. Okay. Mother Goose Melody, 1959. 6.10 by 8.8.
How did it get that title, Helen?
Patterson said, how did it get that title? The whole business of titles is a very loaded subject because I always answer that I'm very poor at remembering numbers. I mean, if I have to refer to certain Mozart, I can hum it, recognize it, tell you when it might be, but the number, et cetera, in all music, or numbered paintings, or numbered poems, or anything else, are meaningless to me, and I like a frame of reference. And sometimes I have a title before I have the picture. Sometimes I have a picture, and on the way out of my studio, I will say to anybody around, including the express man, give me a title, hurry. Periodically, I will keep something I used to be ashamed of. Now I think it's just a splendid idea, which is a title list. And as I need a title and it seems fitting to the picture, I scan the list and I think, perfect, that's it. In some cases, I think this is one, as the picture developed, not because of subject matter and not because of title, because it didn't have a title then, but the needs of the picture and my associations with both the forms in the picture and what must have been unconsciously my memories and very consciously my procedure, I think all combined to give me the title. I think if it were titled something else, and this is the hooker in the whole issue of titles, if I called this number 12, that a lot of things one sees in it as Mother Goose Melody would not be apparent, or far less. And because it is that, one is given a sort of Rorschach projection test, which I don't like, yet in a certain way acknowledge and use. So it's the whole point is how good or bad is the painting, and things are titled. I wish it were as easy as when in the Quattrocento or Renaissance, there was your subject matter and there was your title. It's another issue today. Swan Lake #1. This was part of a series I did called Swan Lake. 1961, 7 by 9 by 7 by 10. I'm sorry, 7/9 by 7/10. 1962, a little out of focus. Out of focus. This is it, in the Gray Art Gallery and Study Center of New York University. I was going to say New York Hospital. Seascape with Dunes. I painted it in Provincetown in '62, and it's 510 by 11:8. I would like to get them in focus because I think that's about all we have are mediocre slides, but they can at least be in focus. Okay? And they're not. So I'm going to wait till this one is.
Closer, I think.
Closer? Further?
If you don't talk directly.
Louder?
There you
Like that?
There you go.
Okay. It's still out of focus. You had it better a minute ago. If you can all see better than I. The left here, the left side is always out of focus.
It may be because you're so close to it.
I'm not alone in this.
I know. So just keep having the person up there work on the focus. I can try to do it by hand.
What's the matter with it?
Yeah, because that's not going
No.
There we go.
All right. Now don't breathe out there. All right.
Did you practice upright or on the floor?
Probably on the floor. The focus slips, so just adjust to it. That's all. It's obvious. And then, as often happens, I don't remember in this particular case, but I never judge a picture while it's on the floor. I mean, I do, and I know basically how it should go and how good or bad it is or what it might still need. And I would say 99 times out of 100 exactly what the bottom and the right side are. But then often I will put a canvas up because I think pictures go on walls and have to be seen on walls. We don't look at them as rugs. Should be judged on the wall. So I will often work on a picture once it's either on an easel or propped up against the wall, and then return it to the floor or not. And then I might find that in turning it around different ways, that what I considered top might be left side. And then every action demands a reaction, so then you have to do other things to it, if that's the way it's going to work. And as I said before, the final judgment is how well it works in space and light and in terms of what you were trying to say and it was trying to say.
Would the canvas be stretched on a stretcher?
Sometimes I stretch them first, sometimes I just staple them to the floor. Sometimes I will put them on wooden horses and work sort of from the hip height. I would say most of the time it's unstretched canvas on the floor.
And then you determine the size after.
Well, if I'm going to cut it down, I will. But only once in a while, as in that paper piece, or a picture I have at the Brooklyn Museum. Those are only two pictures I can think of. One other, in which I rolled out as I needed. But generally, I will feel sort of in my shoulders a sense of the scale I want to work on, whether it's this size or this size and feel, well, let's cut off something 7 by 10 feet or 6 by 6 feet, or how about 20 by 8 feet? And many of those pictures might turn out to be much smaller than they were cut originally. But generally it's within the feel. Sometimes I will have 20 stretchers stretched up for me of various or similar sizes and feel, let's see what happens now. This is part of another series I made. It's called Buddha's Court, 1964. It's 8.2 by 7.10. Small's Paradise, 1964, 8.4 by 7.10. This is,
What are the size brushes you use?
again, it varies. I can do anything from a very wide house brush or sable brush to a very fine Japanese bamboo brush, or not use any brushes at all, but use pourings of pale, P-A-I-L, paint, or sponges, or sponges on mop handles. I often will, along with going to the best or worst art supply stores, go into a terrific hardware store or the Five and Dime and feel what tools are around here that, you know, you could sort of play with and use and have fun with. But very often I will do a standard brush picture, though my pictures, part of what I originally was about was that I wanted to eliminate the brush stroke per se. Not that I had a feeling that it was bad, but I felt there were things to do that did not involve brush strokes that could be equally personal and yet more anonymous in terms of the flat plane of the surface I wanted to use, if I make myself clear.
Where's Small's Paradise?
It's at the National Museum of American Art, which is the Smithsonian.
And where did the title come from?
The title, Mr. Sims, my title name. There was a nightclub in Harlem called Small's Paradise, and I had been there the week I made this picture, but I had also, I think, already made the picture of the slide I just showed called Buddha's Court, and as I say, it was part of a lengthy series in '64, and most of them had to do with shapes generally centered with a sort of ambiguous, identical left and right, which really wasn't identical at all, but a play of those ambiguities, and something centered within other centers, and then, according to what the picture needed, more or less on the sides, top, bottom, etc. And this had, and by figure I don't mean personage, but it had a figure shape in it. And when I titled the whole series, one was Buddha's Court, and this was Small's Paradise. Another is called, that I'm not showing you, Interior Landscape. But Small's Paradise seemed fitting, and as I say, I'd been there the night before I titled it. 1966, 3-color space, 7 feet 8 by 7 feet 10. 1967, 10 feet 4 by 7 9, called The Human Edge. The color is very poor on this because what appears to be black inverted L shape on the left is a very sort of darkish brown plum color, and underneath is a very ultramarine, deep purpley blue, none of which read at all.
What were the issues you were trying to deal with when you were working this group?
Pardon me?
What issues were you trying to deal with when you were working through this group painting?
I think dealing more simply with shapes and geometry rather than looser forms and in any way associative forms. Emphasizing more geometry and color, and yet keeping my edges and way of painting as I might have before. Does that answer you?
It's a good start.
This is called Sesame, 1970. 8 feet 10 by 6 feet 11. Genuine Blue, also 1970. 7.9 by 7.7. Chill Factor, 73, 11 feet by 7 feet 1 inch.
Why do you paint so big?
I don't always make large paintings. I think a lot of what I have to say has to be made large. Again, because of the demands of an abstract surface that often cries out to go further and further beyond the edges and corners, that they're not centered, small, easel, salon paintings. But I emphasize at the same time that scale is very important. I think my basic statement has to be manifest through large pictures. And I don't mean they're always giant pictures, but large is not, I would say, well, this is 11 feet high, and that is large. But they're generally under that or around that. And that's not super large, really, in my vocabulary. Anyway, it's Chill Factor, 1973. This is a sculpture I made. I didn't include graphics or gouaches or tapestries or tiles, ceramics, that sort of thing, because I just thought it would be too long and too much and all of it. So I stuck to a selection of pictures, but I did show this for one or two reasons, and it's a sculpture I made. I worked at Anthony Caro's studio in London in '73, and then he had a return match, and about 10 years later used my studio in New York to paint. And next, please. I made 10 sculptures while I was there in London, and that was one of them. And we used to take a coffee break, and I would, during the break, with all the workers and helpers around, this was one of a few posters in Tony's tiny little anteroom. And actually, it was a tea break and freezing cold. And I would stare at that, and I had an idea for a picture, and that just sort of dovetailed into, an idea for a sculpture, and just clicked. And I made, when I got back to my hotel, a memory sketch of what I thought I wanted to make in sculpture and my memory of this, and they all combined to make the sculpture I called the Matisse table, which really looks very much like that. Next. Out of focus. This is called Hint from Pisano, 1973. It's 7 feet 1 by 18 feet 11. This was part of a series of, I did about 10 very long pictures. I had a commission to do something, and they wanted me to do little maquette scale drawings. And instead, I thought, oh, hooray. So I did instead about, I don't know how many enormous pictures instead. And this was one of them. On canvas, yes. This was another. It's called Off-White Square, 73, 6'8" by 21'3". Nature Abhors a Vacuum, also 73, 8 feet 8 by 9 feet 5. Yes. I think probably since, before Mountains and Sea, I found I was, this is all in retrospect, but I was working in very thinned down turpentine and pigments, almost as if it were watercolor on prime sized either linen or cotton, and that has a very resilient surface. But clearly I wanted it liquid and a sort of anonymous wrist in terms of brushiness. And it had, while it wasn't poured, it was getting close to what I knew I must have needed, which was a poured look. And once I was aware of the use of unsized duck, which I really learned from Jackson Pollock, I thought, well, I would try that myself. And it was what I had been waiting for. And then I didn't have to thin things down. And I also, of course, I did thin them down, but there was something further that I had been trying to do and couldn't accomplish, and that was to, again, let the pigment become one with the surface material itself, to sort of wed into the woof and weave of the cotton duck, so that you experienced not something on something, but all as one material. This is called Burnt Norton. Yes? It would what?
Run away the canvas.
I have never had a picture rot. Now, I've only tested it for about 40 odd years. But I think when I look at pictures hanging in the fog that are made with gold, literally, gilt, or frescoes or encaustics, Fayum portraits or Giottos or Pierrots. I've always felt worry about methods and materials, but don't worry at all. I mean, if Picasso and Braque and all of them threw their coffee grinds in with newspaper, they've held up pretty well. And paintings are tougher than you think, and can suffer more than you think. And I think restoration is a real concern, and I take care. But at certain moments, I feel that care is not going to make me so precious that I'm going to lose the ball game for that. Again, this is called Burnt Norton, 1972. It's 5'10" by 8 feet. Out of focus. And that line there is, if you can see it, sort of pink against a yellow wash. The slide is quite poor. 1974, Rapunzel, 9 feet. 6 feet, 9 feet by 6 feet 9. Viewpoint, 1974, 5'8" by 7'9". Ocean Drive West, number 1, 7'10" by 12. Ocean Drive West 2, also 74, 5'10" by 2.5. And that mark on the right is not white, but it's unsized canvas, which I accomplished by using a piece of tape or a wooden stick and removing it once the painting was dry. Tulip Tint, 7'4" by 6'4", 1975.
Do you sign your paintings?
I don't sign them when any more color or any more lines would wreck it aesthetically. In other words, there are pictures every so often, and I will sign the back of it someplace. Because if just that signature would take away from the drawing of the painting. If it doesn't, I sign them. Stand of Willows, 75, 10 feet 3 by 6 feet 11. This is an installation shot of a show I had in November 75. There are 2 paintings in it, one called Giant Step and the other called After Hours. The former is 7'9" by 13.3, and After Hours is 5 feet by 14 feet 1. Natural Answer, 76, 8 feet by 11. Into the West, 1977, 8 feet by 11. And all these are pictures I worked on and on. I mean, just bulldogged the canvas, really, in a way, pounded into it, and must have lost the picture I had while making it in the process dozens of times, and almost obsessed, kept going till I thought it was finished. This is called Salome, 1978, 710 by 13.6. White Devil, which has just layers of paint on it. 1978. Acrylic. The earlier pictures were oil. Most of these are acrylic, practically all. It dried faster. I think I had used up the I'd used up my liking for the, at times, oil and turpentine sort of ring aura created by using oil pigments that bled out into the unsized canvas. Acrylics tend less to do that, though sometimes they do, and you bargain for it, and either you use it or like it or ignore it or get rid of it. And as I say, it dried faster, and again, it was a challenge, and I felt I was so used to this other thing, and this was something new around, and I thought, at first I thought, I don't want to monkey with acrylics, you know, let the others do that. I'm going to stick to this. And then I thought, try it, and I liked it, and it made sense. And I think a lot of art comes from lucky or thoughtful, original uses and accidents of methods and materials. I don't mean that's what does it. It doesn't imply that a new material is going to make something terrific. But very often, it will make you embark on a whole new road. Where are we? Pilot, 6 feet by 4.7. Portrait of a Lady in White, 610 by 4 feet. And that's a title I took from Titian, actually, because it came from a picture I liked very much of his. Chiaroscuro, 79, 7.6 by 5.6. No, that's wrong. There's a slide missing. The one, no, just proceed. Just keep going forward. Okay. Portrait of Margarita Tripp, 7.6 by 4.10. No, you skipped one called Aurora, which
I think it just didn't go through the machine.
it did a minute ago.
It will go back.
That's it. This is Aurora, 1980, 8.3 by 3.8. For EM, 1981, 5.11 by 9. Can you hold this a minute? By 9.7. And I had for a long time a fascination with Manet, loving many of his pictures, but at the same time feeling, I don't get it. Why is he so great? And is he so great? Because I see so many Manets that I'm supposed to be dying over that don't move me. And there must be something that I'm missing. Well, now I have a whole view on that, which I won't get into. But the good Manets, as in everything else, can be great Manets. But I found the Manet show, as many other blockbusters show, something else. Anyway, there is a picture in the Chicago Institute, and that's it, that I stared at. I carried postcards of it all over the place for months. And this actually is called Still Life with Carp, and it's a very small picture made in 1864. And mine is, I think, 5'11" by 9'7", yes. And of course, I'm not one to overdwell on dredging up the postcard or whatever that helped make the picture, but in this one particular case, I thought it was a relevant thing to show. And again, you could never recognize it if I hadn't shown you that. This is called Suite for the Good-Humored Lady. 4 feet 6 by 6'5". Out of focus. I think we should drop the machine on the floor and pick it up. What? Yeah. Did you all hear that by mistake? This is called Parrot Jungle, but you can't see the parrots because it's out of focus. Right. 1981, 4'3" by 7'8". I would like it more in focus because, okay, that's a little better. Sacrifice Decision, 1981, 4 feet 6 by 9'11". Grand Tour, 83, 8'1" by 11'11". Middle of the Journey, 83, 4'12" by 12'5". Madrid, 1984, 5'4" by 9'9". Out of the Blue, 1985, 5'5" by 3'6". On the Cusp, 85, 6 feet 9 inches by 4'1".
Are these thin and thick paintings, artistic washes and thick paint on these?
What do you mean?
Opaque. Is it opaque over the wash?
Many of them have tinted flat backgrounds and paint on top of that. Yes, but very often they were simultaneous. Paris at Night, 86, 7'2" by 4'8". This is a work on paper, a gouache, and it's 1987, 20 inches by 27. It's out of focus. And I'm showing this in a way to bring you back to the 49 little work on paper, because essentially it's the same gestalt and the same cubism, only that much later, and one recognizes it differently. It's called Canal Street. I did a whole series called Canal Street. This is Canal Street number 4, and it has a lot of mediums in it. There's sepia and acrylic paint and gouache and maybe even a little pastel. And the paper color is literally paper. And I worked it and reworked it for days and days and days. And I think I traveled back and forth looking at it from maybe 20 feet away and walking up to it. I think I walked about 40 miles on this picture before I got it in place. Next. We're way over the hump, folks. Tutaku, this is a graphic, it's an etching, and 87, it's a large one. It's 7'4" in height by 3'5" across. It's all one color, and is really on one copper plate, a drawing in touche. Dovecote, 87.
Pardon me? Pardon me, I can't hear you.
Yes, pretty much. I have a picture in which I, on purpose, mixed oil and water. That is acrylic, and I saw Lenny Beaucourt back there. He's cringing, I'm sure. And it's held up wonderfully, and I was able to do something in it that I couldn't do otherwise, but it's a nightmare to get into. And actually, it's something I don't like. It's the wrong enzymes if you're thinking in terms of meals. They just don't go. This is called Dovecote. Mardi Gras, out of focus, wildly out of focus. Okay. Next, Mardi Gras was 7'8" by 4'2". These are pictures from a show I had recently. Again, poor slides. This is called Morpheus, and it's 9'6" by 7'5". Toward Dark, and these are all 87s and 88s. 9'10" by 7'5", out of focus too, but let it go. Tangent, 5'5" by 9'4". Casanova, 5'11" by 11'10". Ebb Tide, 5'11" by 7 feet. Fairy Tale, 10'1" by 6'6". And With Violet, 8'11" by 6'4". Thank you very much.
Helen and I will be right back, and we'll hold the questions until after she and I talk a bit.
You hold. All right. Okay.
Helen, as a...
I think this is terribly funny to suddenly part these curtains, and here we are. I want you to know that the head of the Y said if I didn't come back just now to make all checks payable to his estate. So
Helen, as a young Bennington graduate,
we're not going to have many questions. Yeah.
you were immediately into the middle of the leading artistic figures of the early 50s and quickly became one of them yourself. You're a woman in your early 20s. How did this make you feel?
How did it make me feel to be?
To be in the midst of things quite so quickly.
I really didn't think about it terribly much. It was an exciting time in New York, and you could feel that in the air, and there was so much for me to see and learn for two reasons. One is that I had an enormous appetite for it. It all was something I was dying to get at, and it was quality available and there, and you couldn't deny it. So it was a very exciting moment, and very productive, and part of youth, but also part of that moment 40 years ago.
And it is kind of astonishing to think that it is 40 years ago that these things happen. In many ways, you're part of a kind of apostolic progression, a progression that begins with Jackson Pollock, who you, in a sense, studied at Bennington and then became a kind of compatriot of. And then in turn, with a painting such as Mountains and Sea, your work had the same kind of influence Pollock's work had on you. It had on other artists, specifically Kenneth Nolan, Morris Lewis, as they encountered this work, and it forever changed the way they worked. What's fascinating, having realized that you were part of this kind of, as I say, apostolic succession of creative people and of new ideas, is the way you refer so often to cubism. In fact, what we often think of as abstract expressionism and its breakthrough is a denial of cubism. If your work is cubism, where are the cubes?
The question doesn't stop me. I think you should know where they are.
Well, could you help me?
The cubes are assimilated, and at times they are more or less visible, as in a picture such as Dovecote or Mardi Gras, where there are apparent squares, circles, planes against planes. But I think one can even look at, you can say, where is the cubism in the later Cézanne? You can say, where is the cubism in Pollock? You can say, even projecting it, where is the cubism, and I'm using, this is license with a particular moment of cubism, but in Monet's, I mean in the play of space, very often what Hoffman used to call a push and pull, and you don't need spelled out for you the guitar, the music notes, the classic 1910 Brock Picasso Cubist pictures, but it is a woven-in gestalt that is your basic language and vocabulary, and often seems to disappear totally, and often does disappear totally. But it's essentially those same ground rules that make the picture work, that the idiom is built in and you don't need it spelled out.
in many ways, I think some of the great triumphs of your work come at that moment when you forget Cubism, or when I forget Cubism as someone coming to them art historically.
Well, I don't want to over-labor this whole thing of Cubism. I mean, obviously Cubism was then and I'm now, and Pollock was then, and it's another issue today. I don't consider myself a Cubist. It's sort of been brought up that those were my origins, and I say yes with, it makes perfect sense. Yes.
If I could just name a few artists.
I mean, I wasn't trained as a pure surrealist. I was trained as a cubist. I wasn't trained as a
with those sources.
As an engineer, whatever. Yes.
If I just said an artist's name, would you be willing to just say a few responses to it?
No.
For instance,
yes.
well, if I said
Yes, no.
If I said Degas, what would you say?
That I think he's a great painter, and I think Degas is a fascinating painter because you can't put him in the same cookie cutter mold the painters I really admire the most are the least pinned downable in terms of what did they do. It's hard to get a handle on what their main tool is. The way you can say, and I'm a great admirer of Monet, but you can place the whole syndrome of haystacks and the way the paint is put down, and you can identify with that just as you can with many other series pictures by more contemporary artists. With Degas, with Matisse, with several other painters, Courbet, there's no one thing that makes you say, this is his message. And there's something wonderful about that, because the whole body of work, you hardly ever see a Matisse that misses. It's like Mozart. Was that sort of an answer?
Great.
Yes.
How about if I said Kandinsky?
I learned a great deal from him, especially the very washy earlier ones. I did not go so much for the prismatic later ones, the more Bauhausy, if that's what it was. But it fell right into the line of, Gorky was to follow, and it was even though it wasn't part of Cubism, it was what I went to in loosening up out of rigid Cubist training. And there it was already sort of seemingly turpentined down, fluid drawing. And those are beautiful pictures, yes.
How about if I said Mondrian?
I think Mondrian, again, like Matisse, is a fabulous painter. One of the most moving things to me is to see some of his early works, such as the pear trees. I was talking about this yesterday, where you can see him. This is true in any show, where you see a young artist already, since you know in retrospect what they're about today, you can see all of it there then, and you can see this beautiful, touching, hard-working struggle to get at what they haven't reached that they know they have to do. And it hasn't been manifest, but there's this urgent try. And even if the pictures look dead or ridiculous, they make such total sense given the whole oeuvre that it's wonderful for me to see. And when I look at Mondrian and those early pear trees, or even before that, it's all one lingo. And in the end, there are the final glorious, the good ones are great, red, black, yellow, squares with the black grids. I myself am not a big fan of the one called Boogie Woogie, but the ones, many of the others, I think he's sensational.
And one last artist, how about if I said the sculptor David Smith?
Nothing better, yes. I think David was a giant and made enormous contribution to art.
In John Elderfield's recent book that I talked about at the beginning, he indicates that he's going to give no or very little personal information because that doesn't seem at all pertinent to him in discussing your work. Can you discuss what you might find that would be pertinent in your personal life that might help people understand your work?
Nothing.
I thought you might say that.
So why'd you ask?
Let me talk about an aspect of you and your life that many people in the audience may not know, and that is your work with the NEA, the National Endowment for the Arts. What does it feel like to be a non-personal, I would say non-political artist, and find yourself in the sort of maelstrom of Washington political art life?
I, in all honesty, Patterson, think that is part of the whole, your personal life. One is one thing, and painting is another. And it's something I do. And I'm doing it because I'm doing it.
Do you think if you had to compare the contribution you might make as a member of the NEA sort of governing board and as a painter, which are really more important? And I think I know, but that's what's so interesting about you as an artist being involved with an organization such as that.
I don't think there's any choice. I mean, it's obvious. I wouldn't be there if the answer weren't there already.
Now you're going to really get mad at me with this question.
Well, why are we ending this?
No, it won't. It won't. We will be ending. Could you just say, when I was at your house recently, I saw the most wonderful photograph of you at the White House, which I found fantastic, because sometimes these worlds of art and the rest of life don't collide. And there you were, on the verge of colliding with the President of the United States.
I collided, yes.
And you had a very good time in that gathering, in that circumstance, whereby, in a certain sense, you as an artist became involved in another milieu.
But I think today, as in all times past, artists have found themselves in crazy milieus, and milieus that involve the monde and the world and life and values and things around you that are not where you are living as an artist making truthful pictures. And that's all incidental. I think more of it is made today, maybe because there are more cameras, but Rubens and Goya and Watteau and everybody else had their own little nights with Reagan.
No,
and,
I don't think you went to the Reagans. You didn't go to the Reagans out of an interest in his politics.
It was the food.
Yeah, exactly.
Right, yeah.
Can you imagine working in a very different way? We saw one of your sculptures. Can you imagine pursuing other sculptures?
Yes. Sometime. I love doing the sculpture. And at times I feel, which is one reason, fortunately, that I try different mediums from time to time, because it gets me out of working alone and I'm suddenly with artisans or fellow artists, and it's a matter of process, and sometimes process doesn't go with my demanding, impatient, artistic personality. And it's a very good tempering lesson, and it also brings something back to the thing I want to do most, which is painting. And so when I make these little forays off to Japan to do a woodcut or London to do sculpture, it all comes back into the painting, but the whole experience is wonderful, and sometimes the work I do there is good.
Your work, because of its nature and a kind of quality of transcendence, which I see as I look at your paintings and thought so intensely about as I looked at the images that flashed before us tonight, seems to rise above temporality and seems to rise above the specific, above biography, above politics. Do you consider your work American or international?
It's American in its basis and in what people would call American-style painting, pardon the expression, because obviously large-scale abstract pictures like mine came out of the first and second generation New York schools. But I hope, as in all art that's worth something, it's universal.
Is it beyond gender? Do you think there's such a thing as women's art?
No.
The question was, is the work beyond gender? And the simple answer was no.
Should we rise above it?
Yes. Gene Goosen, as in the essay that he wrote in the 1969 catalog that accompanied the Whitney Museum's exhibition of your work, talked about your persistence in prying away at the spaces available to easel painting and making it seem less of an anachronism and more of a forecast of broader news to come. In a sense, those words written really 20 years ago, I think, do sum up the fact that you can continue to work through a set of ideas and bring a kind of newness to them. Do you ever lose faith? Does this extraordinary sort of ongoing band of energy that I think is embodied in those works, does it ever have any sense of doubt that accompanies it?
It's funny because when people ask me that, I don't feel particularly brave or with faith, but as if there were nothing else to do except what I do. I mean, there are no choices. I mean, what else should I do? Thank you. Yeah, one more.
Question is, what is your working procedure?
Yes,
how do you work?
It's a mess. I know that I'm going to work, and so I never over panic if I spend a long time not working, and I'm trying to give you a précis of this whole thing because it's a big subject, but if I don't work long enough, I feel terrible, and then I know I must get to work. And then there are moments when you don't work as easily and as well, or start or continue the way you might like to, or the way your other rhythms have gone previously. I have so much built-in discipline and will in terms of paint and production, and faith in that, just in terms of survival, that that I've never felt every morning from 9 to noon I will paint, or I don't paint during the day as some artists do, and I will paint from 10 p.m. to 3 a.m. And I don't judge anybody who does. I just don't work that way. At times when I have had terrible trouble getting to work, I feel even if you rearrange flowers, sharpen pencils, make phone calls, eat peanuts, go to this place that is your lair and get bored enough or angry enough so that you'll do something, even if it is awful for weeks, but do it. Or sit here and look at other pictures, or but come to this place. But that doesn't, thank God, happen too often. But I am not disciplined in rigid working hours.
Helen, you've made an extraordinary body of work. You showed us in a very simplified way 40 years of that work. In a sense, one could say what a remarkable past you have behind you. But a major book has just come out about your work. I mean, the kind of book that it seems to me any artist would dream about having come out about their work in terms of its comprehensiveness, its thoroughness, the quality of the color reproductions. The Fort Worth Museum of Modern Art is organizing an exhibition which will open at the Museum of Modern Art, arguably the center of modern art and contemporary art. How does all of this past and this extraordinarily powerful present interact? And would you maybe use that as a way of concluding our remarks tonight?
Interact in what?
This past and this present. A past which is quite sustained, but a present which puts you really at the center of your work, in the prime.
I think every moment along the way is a similar moment. I mean, I feel fortunate that all this happened all at once, but actually it didn't all happen all at once. It all happened over a long time. And very often, along every year of those decades, I had very much the same feeling that I have right now of, isn't this nice, or isn't this wonderful, or isn't this difficult, or isn't this exciting, or isn't this scary, or isn't this meaningless, and I don't feel suddenly different. I feel the way I usually feel.
Well,
Yes.
You clearly feel in the midst of it.
Thank you. You all must have had enough.
Thanks for listening. For more information on the 92nd Street Y, New York, and all of our programs, please visit us at 92ny.org.